She opened a folder and pulled out a single grainy photo. It was a close-up of a small, dark object floating on the surface of the pool. It was impossible to tell what it was, but the way she held it, the solemnity in her voice, made it seem like a biohazard. This is just one example. I've seen multiple toys. I have witnessed children playing in a manner that is disruptive and potentially dangerous to the integrity of the pool. Leo's head snapped towards the photo. That's not what happened. It's a toy fish. You're presenting a single out-of-context photo. The photo, Alara said, ignoring him, is a record of the incident. Furthermore, the constant introduction of foreign objects, no matter how small, can lead to a buildup that strains the filtration system. The pool is a shared amenity. We all have a responsibility to keep it clean and safe. Maya stepped forward, her voice trembling with emotion. Our daughter is a good kid. She was just playing. This fine and the ban. It's so unfair. Mr. Henderson held up a hand. We understand your frustration, Mrs. Miller. However, the bylaws are in place for the protection of all residents. The board has reviewed Ms. Davies' report and the photographic evidence. The rules are clear. A fine is warranted. The board finds in favor of the complaint. The fine stands and the ban will be enforced. The words hit them like a physical blow. A profound sense of helplessness washed over them. Alara gave a small, almost imperceptible nod of satisfaction. As Leo and Maya stood to leave, a wave of cold injustice washing over them. Leo's eyes scanned the room, the sterile walls, the unyielding faces. Then he saw it. Mounted on a lamppost just outside the window, angled slightly to capture the pool area, was a small, inconspicuous security camera. It was barely noticeable, almost hidden in the foliage. Leo's heart hammered in his chest. What about the security footage? He said, his voice a low rumble. There's a camera right there. It must have recorded the whole thing. Mr. Henderson gave a weary sigh. That's a new camera, Mr. Miller. It's a low-grade feed. It's for vandalism deterrence, not for specific incidents. The footage is often unreliable, and we don't have the resources to go through hours of tape for every minor complaint. He waved a dismissive hand. The matter is closed, but for Leo it wasn't closed. He felt a fierce protective rage rise within him. He and Maya left the meeting in a stunned silence. They drove home, the weight of the injustice heavy in the air between them. When they arrived, Chloe was waiting on the porch, her face filled with concern. Leo couldn't bring himself to tell her what happened. He just hugged her tight, a promise forming in his mind. He spent the rest of the day in a haze of anger, pacing the house. He couldn't let this go. He had to prove his daughter's innocence. The next morning, he began to make calls. He called the HOA, asking for access to the security footage. He was met with polite but firm resistance. He was stonewalled, given a dozen different excuses. He knew they were protecting Alara, afraid to cross her. Then a desperate idea sparked. He remembered a retired neighbor, a quiet man named Walter who had worked in IT for decades. He was a tech wizard, the kind of guy who could probably build a computer from spare parts. Leo knocked on Walter's door, his hope hanging by a thread. He explained the whole story, the ridiculous complaint, Alara's smug satisfaction, the fine, and the dismissive attitude of the HOA regarding the footage. Walter listened patiently, stroking his chin. The HOA doesn't mess around, he said, his voice raspy. Especially not with Alara Davies. She's a piece of work. Had a run-in with her over the color of my mailbox, citing bylaws and all that nonsense. A surge of relief coursed through Leo. So you believe me? I believe a man who's had a run-in with her, Walter said, a wry smile on his face. But I can't just hack into the HOA feed, Leo. That's a whole other kind of violation. I know, Leo said, his shoulders slumping. But there has to be a way. Walter was quiet for a moment. He looked at the frustration on Leo's face, the desperate glint in his eyes. Then he said, the HOA doesn't even know what's on that feed. They only ever check it if there's a major incident. They probably haven't even looked at it in weeks. They just take Alara's word for it. He led Leo into his dimly lit study, a room filled with computers and blinking lights. He sat down at a desk, his fingers flying across the keyboard. He pulled up a map of the neighborhood, then a schematic of the security system. I'm not hacking anything, Walter said almost to himself. I'm just taking a look at a weak point. He typed a few more lines of code, the screen filling with a cascade of text. Leo held his breath, watching. The screen flickered, and then a new window popped up. The image was grainy, distorted, but there was no mistaking it. It was the community pool, shot from the angle of the camera on the lamppost. In the bottom corner, a small, blinking timestamp read 7:15/2025, 2:34 p.m. The exact moment of the incident. Walter leaned back, a small, satisfied smile on his face. "There you go, Leo. They've got it all on tape." He clicked a button, and the video started to play. It was silent. A silent film of that perfect sun-drenched Saturday. And as they watched, the perfect blue of the water, the harmless splashing, and Alara Davies's rigid form, Leo and Walter were about to witness a confession that would change Evie. The screen flickered, a low hum emanating from Walter's computer. The security footage, grainy and washed out by the afternoon sun, came to life. The scene was familiar, almost deceptively peaceful. It was the same Saturday afternoon, the same perfect blue pool. Chloe and Liam were visible in the corner of the frame, their bright, small figures a blur of joyful motion. The timestamp in the corner blinked steadily, a silent witness to the events that were about to unfold. Leo leaned forward, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. He watched as his daughter dropped a tiny plastic fish, and he saw with perfect clarity the little silvery minnow dart from beneath the pool ladder. It was exactly as he had described it to the HOA board. A natural occurrence, a tiny fish from the community lake that had somehow found its way into the pool. It wasn't an act of contamination or pollution. It was just nature, beautiful and simple, and Alara Davies had twisted it into a malicious act. Then, Alara herself came into view. She moved with her characteristic rigid grace, positioning her chair. The video was silent, but her body language was loud and clear. Leo could practically see the disdain in her starched posture as she watched Chloe. He saw her lips moving as she spoke to him, and he remembered the sharp, accusatory tone of her voice. He watched himself, a figure in the frame, rise to confront her. The entire exchange played out in miniature, a silent film of injustice. But then, the footage shifted. After she had gathered her belongings and stalked away from the pool, Alara didn't leave the area. The camera positioned on the lamppost gave it all away. She walked past the pool deck, her head held high, and disappeared from the frame. Leo thought the video was over, but Walter, his eyes narrowed, held up a finger, silently telling him to wait. The timestamp kept ticking. Alara reappeared a moment later, moving with a new urgency, a furtive quality she had carefully hidden during her initial confrontation. She was carrying something small in her hand, obscured by her body. She stopped at the edge of the pool, her back to the camera, and then she did something strange. She leaned over the side, her perfect posture breaking just a little, and lowered her hand into the water. Leo's brow furrowed. What was she doing? She wasn't cleaning anything. She seemed to be putting something in the pool. He saw her hand, a pale blur, move beneath the surface. For a few seconds she remained still, her hand submerged. Then she pulled it back, a quick, jerky motion, and straightened up as if nothing had happened. She looked around, a quick paranoid scan of the empty pool deck, and then, satisfied that no one was watching, she walked away, this time for good. Walter froze the frame. He zoomed in, trying to enhance the grainy footage. "Leo," he said, his voice a low, disbelieving whisper. "Do you see what she just did?" Leo's mind raced. He had no idea what she had done, but he knew with a gut-wrenching certainty that it was something awful. "I don't know." She put something in the water. "But what?" Walter clicked a button. He had a software that could analyze video for subtle motion and color changes. He ran a diagnostic on the few frames where Alara's hand was in the water. The program highlighted a small, almost invisible cloud that seemed to drift away from her fingers. It was so faint, so translucent, it was easy to miss. But it was there. The software identified it as a small, particulate cloud, like a fine powder dissolving. "It's like she's sprinkling something in the water," Walter said, his face a mask of disbelief. "And then she waited a few seconds for it to disperse." Leo's mind flashed back to the HOA meeting. to Ilara's accusations. "She said my daughter was contaminating the pool," he said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "She said our daughter was polluting it." Walter rewound the footage to the moment the minnow darted towards Chloe's plastic toy. He slowed it down. They watched as the small fish, a harmless creature, swam toward the colorful plastic. The fish didn't eat the toy or even try to. It just circled it, a natural curiosity. Then the minnow did something strange. It began to swim in frantic, erratic circles. Its movements were fast and uncoordinated, as if it was in distress. Its tiny fins fanned uselessly. It spiraled downward, its body twitching, and sank to the bottom of the pool. Leo stared at the screen, his stomach turning over. "Oh my God," he whispered. She didn't just make a false claim. She killed that fish. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Ilara had seen the fish. She had seen Chloe's toy. She had seen a perfect opportunity. The panicked look on her face wasn't because of the minnow. It was because she knew the fish wasn't supposed to be there. And then she'd gone and done something about it. She hadn't just accused his daughter of attracting wildlife. She had, with a sinister, calculated coldness, murdered a tiny, harmless fish to create a false narrative, to create her own evidence. She had then used that lie to take the matter to the HOA, where she was known as a champion of their bylaws. "What was that stuff she put in?" Leo asked, his voice shaking with a cold rage he had never felt before. Walter ran the analysis again, a deeper scan. His fingers flew across the keyboard, his brow furrowed in concentration. The software, a sophisticated program he had built for his own projects, analyzed the chemical signature of the powder cloud. A list of possible matches came up. Walter read the names, his face growing paler with each one. He stopped on one. He knew what it was. It was a common, highly toxic pesticide sold legally in gardening supply stores to kill pond insects. It was a slow-acting poison designed to kill small aquatic life. A handful of it, a tiny pinch, would be enough to kill a small fish. "She put poison in the pool, Leo," Walter said, his voice barely audible. "She put a pesticide in the public pool. To frame your daughter." The horror of it washed over Leo. It wasn't just a simple case of a Karen being overzealous about HOA rules. It was a premeditated, malicious act. She had planned this. She had brought the poison with her. She had seen an opportunity to get rid of a tiny minnow that shouldn't have been in the pool, and she had seized it. And she had used his innocent daughter as a pawn. The fine, the ban. It was all a cover for her own monstrous act. She knew, Leo said, his voice a low growl. She knew that fish was going to die. That's why she said it was a health hazard. She was setting the stage. Walter nodded, his eyes glued to the screen. She's completely unhinged. This isn't about bylaws. This is about control. And she was willing to do something horrible to get her way. A terrible silence hung in the air, punctuated only by the low hum of the computer. Leo stared at the screen, at the tiny, grainy image of the dead fish sinking to the bottom of the pool. The injustice he had felt before was nothing compared to this. This was a whole new level of evil. This woman had deliberately poisoned a public space to get her way. She had lied, cheated, and manipulated. And she was about to get away with it. "What do we do?" Leo asked, his voice cracking with emotion. Walter looked at him, his face grim. "We have undeniable proof. This is not just a violation. This is a criminal act. What she did could have been dangerous for a child. This could be a felony." Leo couldn't process it. His mind was a whirlwind of anger and disbelief. He had the truth. He had the evidence. He had a video that proved, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that Ilara Davies was a liar and a poisoner. The HOA, the board, the fine, the ban, it was all about to be obliterated. He had the upper hand, the trump card. He could expose her, ruin her reputation, and make her pay for what she had done. But what would happen then? Would the HOA back them, or would they try to cover it up to avoid a massive lawsuit? What would Ilara do when she realized she had been caught? The thought of her cold, calculating rage filled him with a new kind of fear. She was capable of this. What else was she capable of? "The world is watching, Leo," Walter said, his voice soft but firm. "You have to decide what happens next. You have to decide what kind of justice you want." Leo took a deep breath, his knuckles white as he clenched his hands. His daughter's band still stood. The fine was still due, and the woman who had done this was still living in the neighborhood, a smug smile on her face. He looked at the screen, at the smoking gun of the footage. He had the power now. The weight of it was immense. He was no longer just a father trying to clear his daughter's name. He was a man with a dangerous secret, and he was about to unleash it upon the world. He had a choice to make, and the fate of Alara Davies, and maybe even the future of Emerald Meadows, lay in his hands. The footage played on the small laptop screen, a silent, damning narrative. The grainy quality couldn't obscure the truth. Ilara's furtive movements, the barely there cloud of poison, the frantic dying spasms of the tiny minnow. Leo stared, his blood running cold, and a primal protective anger took root in his soul. This was no longer a disagreement over rules. This was a criminal act, a cold-blooded manipulation that put his daughter at risk. "We have to show this to them," Leo said, his voice flat, devoid of its previous frustration. It was a new kind of fury, a silent, focused rage. The board. The whole neighborhood. Walter, sitting in the half-light of his study, nodded grimly. They need to see what she did. This changes everything. The next day, Leo didn't wait for a scheduled meeting. He called Mr. Henderson directly, his voice tight with a newfound authority. "I have evidence that completely invalidates the complaint against my daughter," he stated. "It's a matter of serious criminal concern. I need an emergency session of the board." Mr. Henderson, wary and suspicious, agreed to meet that evening, but only with the 3 board members present. He refused to allow Ilara to be there, citing the need for an impartial initial review. It was a small victory, but Leo knew the real fight would begin when Ilara saw what he had. The meeting room was as sterile and unwelcoming as before, but this time the atmosphere was different. Leo was no longer a supplicant. He was a man holding a weapon. He laid Walter's laptop on the table, its screen dark and unrevealing. The 3 board members, Mr. Henderson, a woman named Carol, and a man named David, sat with skeptical expressions, their arms crossed. "Mr. Miller, you said this was urgent," Mr. Henderson said, his tone dry and impatient. "We have very busy schedules." Leo didn't waste time with a preamble. He pushed the laptop forward and opened the video file. "This is the security footage from the lamppost overlooking the pool. The footage you told me was too low grade to review. I have a neighbor who was able to enhance it. I want you to watch what happened on Saturday at 2:34 p.m. He pressed play. The silent, unblinking eye of the camera recorded the scene. They watched the innocent game of Chloe and Liam, the bright plastic fish. They saw Ilara's arrival, her confrontation with Leo, and then, the moment she walked away. They saw her return, her hand moving furtively. David, the youngest board member, squinted at the screen. "What is she doing?" he murmured. "Watch closely," Leo said, his voice a low command. The footage zoomed in, the image pixelated but clear enough to show a faint, white cloud drifting from her hand as she lowered it into the water. Carol gasped, a hand flying to her mouth. Mr. Henderson's face, which had been unreadable, tightened with a sudden dawning horror. "What is that?" he demanded, his voice a low growl. Leo didn't answer. He let the video play on, letting the undeniable evidence speak for itself. They watched as the minnow, which had been harmlessly circling the toy, began to convulse. They watched its tiny body spin and twitch, its fins fanning uselessly as it spiraled downward. The board members leaned forward, their skepticism replaced by a sick, dawning horror. The video ended. The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating. David looked at Leo, his eyes wide. She poisoned it," he whispered, as if he couldn't believe the words coming from his own mouth. Carol looked green. That's insane. I can't believe it." Mr. Henderson didn't say a word. He just stared at the laptop screen, at the still frame of the minnow's body sinking slowly through the water. His face was pale, his jaw clenched so tightly a muscle in his cheek twitched. Leo finally broke the silence. "She didn't just lie to you. She committed a criminal act to frame my daughter. She poisoned our community pool. I want the fine reversed, the ban lifted, and I want her to face consequences for what she did." Mr. Henderson finally looked up, his expression guarded, his eyes now cold and calculating. He pushed the laptop back towards Leo. "Mr. Miller, I understand your outrage. We all do. This is a very serious matter." "It's a felony, Mr. Henderson," Leo said, his voice rising. "She put a pesticide in a public pool. What if a child had ingested that water?" Mr. Henderson held up a hand. "We are aware of the potential implications, but there are other factors to consider." A cold dread began to creep up Leo's spine. The board members exchanged a quick, knowing look, and in that brief glance, Leo knew he wasn't going to get the justice he expected. "The footage you've provided," Mr. Henderson began, his tone now professional and detached, "was obtained without authorization. Legally, we cannot use it to take action against a resident. Furthermore, we must consider the liability this creates for the HOA. The moment we acknowledge that our pool has been intentionally poisoned, we expose ourselves to a lawsuit. Every resident could sue us for negligence, for not providing a safe environment. We would have to drain the pool, test the water, and disclose the incident to the entire community. The fallout would be catastrophic." Leo felt as if he had been punched. "Catastrophic? What about the fact that a woman poisoned the pool? Are you seriously going to pretend this didn't happen?" "We're not pretending anything," Carol said, her voice strained. "We just have to be practical. Our priority is to protect the HOA from a financial and legal disaster. A scandal like this would destroy the reputation of Emerald Meadows and could even bankrupt us." "So what's your solution?" Leo asked, his voice shaking with disbelief. "You're just going to let her get away with it?" Mr. Henderson looked at him, his expression one of weary resignation. "We will, of course, reverse the fine and the ban on your daughter. We will issue an apology letter to you. And we will have a quiet word with Ms. Davies reminding her that her behavior is unacceptable." "A quiet word?" Leo exploded, standing up. "She poisoned the pool. My daughter could have been hurt. Are you really going to tell me that a quiet word is all you're going to do?" David shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "We have to weigh the consequences, Leo. This is the least disruptive solution." "We'll make sure she never pulls a stunt like this again." Leo laughed, a short, bitter sound. "You're protecting her. You're not protecting the community. You're protecting yourselves." He slammed his hand on the table. "You are enabling a criminal. This is beyond the scope of your stupid bylaws." The board was unmoved. They were already moving on, their faces set with a grim resolve. They had made their decision. The fine would be voided, the ban lifted. The matter was, in their eyes, closed. As Leo gathered his laptop, his hands trembling with a mixture of rage and betrayal, he looked at their faces, cold and unfeeling. They were willing to sacrifice justice, to risk the safety of the community, to protect themselves from a lawsuit. It was an appalling display of cowardice and self-interest. They had backed Alara once, and they were still backing her, not because they believed her, but because her crime was too big for them to handle. He walked out of the room, leaving the silent, unfeeling faces behind. The cool night air hit him like a physical shock. He had the truth. He had the evidence. But the system he thought would protect him had failed. They had refused to act, prioritizing their financial bottom line over basic morality. Alara was still living in the neighborhood, her smug triumph still intact. The karma shock he had been so sure was coming for her had instead been served to him. He was on his own. He was no longer fighting the HOA or even just Alara. He was fighting a system that had failed him and his family. The real fight had just begun. The humid night air clung to Leo's skin like a shroud. The rage he felt was a physical thing, a churning storm in his gut. He had walked out of that sterile room with the proof of a crime on his laptop and a profound understanding of a broken system. The HOA didn't care about justice. They cared about liability. They had chosen to protect themselves by enabling a poisoner. The thought made his blood boil. He got into his car and drove home in a daze, the streetlights blurring into streaks of gold. Maya met him at the door, her face a question mark. "Well, what happened? Did they reverse it?" Leo tossed the laptop onto the kitchen counter with a thud. "They reversed it," he said, his voice flat. He took a long, shuddering breath. "But they're not doing anything else." He recounted the meeting, his words coming out in a bitter torrent of disbelief and anger. He explained how Mr. Henderson, David, and Carol had watched the footage, seen the poison, and then, with cold corporate logic, decided to cover it up to avoid a lawsuit. He told her about their offer of a quiet word with Alara. Maya listened, her face going from hope to disbelief to a white-hot fury that matched his own. "A quiet word?" she echoed, her voice rising to a near scream. She could have hurt a child, our child, and they're just going to let her get away with it? That's insane. "That's what I said," Leo replied, raking a hand through his hair. "They don't care. It's all about protecting the HOA's reputation, their pockets. They'd rather risk a kid's health than a lawsuit." Chloe came into the kitchen, drawn by the raised voices. "Did the ban get lifted, Daddy?" she asked, her voice small and hopeful. Leo looked at his daughter, at her innocent face, and a fresh wave of rage washed over him. He couldn't let this stand. He couldn't let the world tell her that what was right and wrong didn't matter. "Yes, honey," he said, forcing a smile. "The ban is gone. You can go back to the pool whenever you want." Chloe's face lit up, but she could see the tension between her parents. "What's wrong, Daddy?" Leo knelt down and hugged her tight, burying his face in her hair. "Nothing, sweetie. Everything's fine. We just had a rough meeting. Go get ready for bed. Mommy and I need to talk." After she had gone, the silence was heavy. "So what now, Leo?" Maya asked, her voice low and dangerous. "We can't just let this go." "We can't. I know," he said, a new resolve hardening in his voice. "We have the footage. We don't need the HOA's permission. We take it to the people." The next morning, Leo drove to Walter's house. The air was cool and crisp, a welcome change from the oppressive heat of the previous days. Walter met him at the door, his face a grim reflection of Leo's own. "They didn't act, did they?" he said, not as a question, but as a statement of fact. "They didn't," Leo confirmed. "They're cowards. They're protecting themselves." He held up a small thumb drive. "I need you to help me get this out. I want to put this on every community forum, every social media group. I want to plaster it all over the internet. The HOA won't act, but the people will. I'm going to let the court of public opinion pass judgment on Alara Davies." Walter's eyes gleamed with a quiet satisfaction. "It's about time someone did," he said. "You've got it. I'll prepare the video for upload. I'll make sure it's in every corner of the web." They worked for hours, a focused, almost feverish energy filling the room. Walter created a short, impactful video clip, splicing the most damning parts of the footage together: Ilara's furtive hand, the cloud of poison, the minnow's tragic dance of death. He added a simple title card: HOA Board Ignores a Crime. The anonymity of the internet felt like a cloak of protection, but Leo knew the consequences could be huge. Later that afternoon, as the sun began to set, Leo and Walter sat in front of the computer. With a click, the video was uploaded to the Emerald Meadows community Facebook page, the Nextdoor app, and a few local neighborhood forums. Leo didn't say a word. He just sat back and watched the screen, his heart pounding in anticipation. For the first few minutes, nothing happened. Then, the first comment appeared on Facebook. "What is this? Is this real?" a woman named Sarah wrote. Then another and another. The comments came in a flood, a tide of shock and outrage. "OMG, I live here. Is this footage from our pool? Is that the new lady on Elm Street? This is horrifying. The HOA did nothing? I can't believe it. That's poison. She put poison in the pool? What if a child drank that water?" "I've always had a bad feeling about that woman. This confirms it. She's a monster." The reactions were immediate and furious. The comments section exploded. The video was shared, liked, and commented on 100 times over. People were tagging their neighbors, demanding answers, and calling for an emergency meeting. The virtual world of Emerald Meadows, usually a place for lost dogs and yard sale announcements, had become a digital mob. A righteous army of keyboard warriors demanding justice. Leo felt a surge of triumph, a release of all the pent-up frustration and rage. He had done it. He had bypassed the corrupt system and gone straight to the people. He had unleashed a force that the HOA board could not control. As the sun sank, below the horizon, casting long purple shadows, a sharp, insistent ring from his doorbell shattered the quiet. It was Alara. She stood on his porch, her perfect white linen pants a little wrinkled, her starched posture a little less straight. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a cold, terrifying panic. She held her phone in a trembling hand, the screen displaying the video he had just uploaded. What have you done?" she whispered. The composure that had been her shield and her weapon for so long, finally cracking. The smug mask of triumph was gone, replaced by the raw, naked face of a cornered animal. The karma shock he had been denied at the HOA meeting had arrived, not in a sterile room, but on his front porch, a terrified woman holding the evidence of her own crime. The setting sun cast long purple shadows, and the air, thick with humidity, felt heavy with the weight of Alara's sudden vulnerability. She stood on Leo's doorstep, her perfect posture finally shattered, her face a mask of cold, raw panic. The phone in her trembling hand was a portal to her public undoing. The screen glowed with the comment section of the community page, a digital mob passing judgment with a ferocity she had never anticipated. "What have you done?" she whispered again, her voice a reedy imitation of its usual commanding tone. Her eyes, usually so hard and judgmental, were wide and filled with a frantic desperation. Leo stood on his side of the threshold, the warmth of his home behind him, the cool, dark air of his rage in front of him. He wasn't a supplicant anymore. He was a man with the truth, and a woman who had tried to destroy him was finally broken. He looked at her, at the crumpled dignity and the naked fear on her face, and felt no pity, only a grim satisfaction. "I didn't do anything, Alara," he said, his voice low and steady. "You did. I just showed everyone what you did." Alara's pale face flushed with anger, a flicker of her old fire returning. "You think this is over? You have no right to this footage. It's an illegal invasion of my privacy. I'll sue you for defamation. The HOA will sue you for exposing them to liability." Her voice rose, but it lacked its usual authority. It was a high, thin wail of a person who had lost all control. Leo shook his head slowly. "Defamation is a lie, Alara. I just showed the truth." "And your privacy? You were in a public space on HOA property. There's no privacy to invade. The only thing you've exposed is yourself." He gestured to the phone in her hand. "The HOA knows what you did. I showed them. They chose to protect themselves. Now the community knows. And they won't be so quiet." The mention of the HOA board seemed to ignite a new kind of terror in her eyes. "Take it down," she pleaded, her voice dropping to a desperate whisper. "Please, this is a mistake. We can fix this. I'll admit I was wrong about your daughter. I'll make it right. You'll make it right." Leo scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. "You poisoned a public pool to frame my daughter for a crime you invented. You put a pesticide in the water where kids swim. Do you have any idea what could have happened?" Alara flinched, but she didn't back down. It was a small amount. It was harmless. It was just a momentary lapse in judgment. "A momentary lapse," Maya said, appearing behind Leo, her hands on her hips, her eyes blazing with fury. "You deliberately poisoned a harmless fish and then lied to get our daughter banned from a place she loves. That's not a lapse in judgment, Alara. That's malice." Ilara's eyes flickered to Maya, then back to Leo. She saw the united front, the unshakable resolve in their faces. Her usual tactics were useless here. She couldn't intimidate them. She couldn't lie her way out of this. Suddenly, her demeanor shifted again. The panic was still there, but a cold, calculating resolve replaced the pleas. She straightened her back, a ghost of her former self-possession. "Fine," she said, her voice now dangerously low. "You want to play this game? You think you've won? You have no idea who I am." Leo felt a chill go down his spine. "I know exactly who you are, Alara. You're a sociopath who poisons public places to get what she wants. You're done." She gave him a smirk, a flash of pure, unapologetic evil. Am I that video of yours? It was an anonymous upload, wasn't it? What happens when I tell everyone that you and your little friend Walter have been secretly filming everyone in the pool for months? That you have hundreds of hours of footage of people sunbathing, of their kids playing, of them having private conversations? What happens when I leak that to the news? How do you think the community will feel then? Leo's heart hammered against his ribs. He knew the footage was only of the pool deck, a single camera pointed at a single space. But Ilara's threat was clever, and it was a lie designed to sow fear and paranoia. It was her final weapon. "You're a liar," Maya said, but the conviction in her voice was not as strong. "Am I?" Ilara said, her voice a cruel purr. "I just put a post on the community page accusing you of exactly that. And I've already sent a copy of the original footage to a reporter I know. Do you want to take that risk, Leo? Do you want to find out what happens when the media gets hold of a story about a family who illegally filmed their neighbors? Do you want to see what happens to your daughter then?" Leo's mind raced. He had no choice but to call her bluff. She was a master manipulator, but he knew she wouldn't hesitate to execute the threat. The video was proof of her actions, but her lie could destroy his family's reputation just as easily. Before he could respond, a black car pulled up to the curb. It wasn't a neighbor's car. It was a large, expensive SUV with blacked-out windows. The driver's side door opened, and a man in a perfectly tailored suit stepped out. He was tall, with a strong, imposing build and a face that was unreadable. He walked past Ilara as if she were a ghost, and his gaze landed on Leo. Ilara saw him and her face, which had just moments ago been filled with a cold triumph, now became a portrait of abject terror. She took a step back, her hands coming up in a gesture of surrender. "No," she whispered. I didn't call him." The man ignored her, his eyes locked on Leo. "Mr. Miller," he said, his voice a low, commanding baritone. "My name is Julian. I work for Ms. Davies' father. He's very interested in your little video. We're willing to make this go away, all of it. We can offer you a very generous settlement. All you have to do is take down the video and sign a non-disclosure agreement." Leo stood frozen, the man's words a surreal oral assault. This wasn't just a confrontation with a vengeful neighbor. This was something bigger, something darker. Ilara wasn't just a rich, entitled resident. She was the daughter of someone with power, someone with the resources to send a fixer to his front door. The simple neighborhood dispute had just escalated into a whole new kind.